This is Al Gray reporting for CityStink.net in the Augusta Today Facebook group from the Augusta City Commission Chambers. I come for you today to oppose these contracts, these series of contracts. In 1996, Mayor Bill Campbell of Atlanta engaged in a series of escapades with an Alabama-based general contractor that wound him in prison. At the same time, I had a new client that had the misfortune of signing on to that very same contractor's standard contract. And that became the standard by which I judged aggressive contracts. The damage to that contractor, my contractor, wasn't anything I could do. They had signed off on the contract. We were powerless once they signed that contract. It was a very helpless feeling to see my client, who almost was bankrupted in the process, lose over a period of 5 or 6 months vast sums of money. These contracts extend over 50 years. If that was an aggressive contract, this set of documents is the Mona Lisa of aggressive contracting. The contracts are a blank check where the manager dictates cost from A to Z. Augusta has to control this, because now you're looking at a drain on the general fund. Every dollar is a dollar that's either going to be raised taxes or lost services. The $2 million kitchen is Augusta's, and it should stay with Augusta, irrespective of who you contract with. In other cities where the city owns the kitchen equipment and provides it to the caterer provides up to like 3% of gross revenues to cover depreciation on that equipment. The worst aspect of this thing is that these contracts, if the existing conference center agreement stays in effect, which I understand it does, it represents the opportunity for a gigantic cost shift of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from the conference center agreement over to the T-center agreement. And over the 50 years of this agreement, if you had $300,000 that fell in that category, you'd be talking about $15 million of cost to Augusta. Most of it out of the general fund, the way it looks now. Cost under this agreement should be limited to new T-center costs by capping cost transfers from the conference center agreement. Both Riverfront and Augusta have food and beverage purchases that apparently will be commingled in this big new kitchen you've got. You've got all these huge freezers and everything. You've got purchases that have to go to the hotel for room service, potentially Augustino's, conference center agreement, which is walled off from the T-center agreement by these contracts, and then the T-center. So if you have steaks, for instance, you can see that being purchased. You could have commingling, and what kind of incentives are going to be in place? What kind of controls are going to be in place to keep Augusta's merchandise bought with general funds from being transferred over to the other operation? There's no operation procedure manual in effect for these transactions. Contracts allow members of Riverfront and the management LLC to be charged to the general fund of Augusta, and does not necessarily provide back the charging back of fixed salaries to Riverfront when appropriate. There's language in there that says that timesheets shall be kept to segregate these costs, but I think the language might be missing to provide for the back charging of those fixed salaries back when they do work for the hotels or under the conference center agreement. One thing that came through our review of this over the years is there's considerable disagreement and confusion over what exactly the convention center means. On one hand, it's defined in these contracts to be the T-center, the conference center annex, parking decks. And that is defined as being the convention center. But the budgets have been submitted, as best I can tell, are just for the T-center.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gray. The 5 minutes that you're allotted is up.
Do you have any questions?
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Bowles.
Yeah, Al, could you just follow up where you were going with the budget just for the T-Center?
The budgets that were submitted, from what I was understanding, from what was said, is those numbers were just for the T-Center. They weren't for the overall convention center, as the agreement defines it. And I guess you'd have to get clarification from those who prepared it on that matter. Because I think that there's been a lot of back and forth, and there's been one illusion created by the convention center was all of these entities, when really, contractually, when it comes to the accounting, the flow of funds, and the reimbursement, the T-Center is very specifically spelled out. So the kitchen is only really benefiting the T-Center. The catering applies to the T-Center, not the conference center, not the existing. And there's actually a schedule out there online of various personnel identified with Augusta Convention Center apparently have come underneath the existing conference center catering and management. So my question to you would be this: how do you know who those people are? Because the existing conference center agreement, if I'm understanding it right, is not a profit sharing. Has been described in places at certain times, but it's a certain percentage of revenue, and even those revenues don't specifically include catering. So there's a lot of things that need to be answered with regard to these contracts.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Guilford.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for actually speaking to the commission as well as the audience. When you spoke about the 3% charge for the use of the equipment, where did that come into play at? There was other cities that has done that?
I believe that was the city of Austin, Texas, that contracts with Aramark for catering, and that was one place I've seen it. But these contracts really go across the board. These particular contracts, the fees are very reasonable. I would grant you that. There's no question about the fees being very reasonable. It's the other capabilities that shift costs I'm most concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Al, I think the issue I have as well is, and I agree with you, I think that the fees are not really extreme. I just feel like, it's not enough, I guess, language in there that protects the city and the citizens, if you will. And what I'd like to saw was, I guess, a few more general management agreements, if you will, on typically how these things work and how they're set up to protect both parties, not just one, but both parties. And I don't really see that here. And I even had a question as well. I think the biggest concern also was the catering, because we have a set amount, I think $3,600 or something like that a month in catering. And I want to know, if you're not using the folks for that particular month or whatever it may be, how do you offset that? Why is it necessary, and why can't we do it on I guess a basis of as need, or whenever the event is coming, you base it on that? And not only that, the catering itself, why can't it be options with the catering? I do know typically in most cases, hotels, they do not outsource. In the conference, as you stated earlier, I can understand that, but the T-Center itself, I guess the avenues there it's kind of great. You can't really say, yeah, you can get caterers to come in and cater that particular event for that particular company or whoever it may be that's leasing it for that particular moment. And I think with that, it kind of got us in a bind as well, or a jam, if you will, because we don't really have much leverage, if you will, when it comes down to how it's structured and set up. Okay, once the agreement is agreed upon, the managers basically state how the catering is going to be set up and what's going to be done as far as costs and what have you. So I'm not really clear on that yet, and that's one of the concerns I would have, I do have now, and I would prefer to see other agreements like that would probably kind of give us a guidance on how these agreements are typically set up.
Well, I share that concern. I'd like to see somewhere in the United States where this set of circumstances has been replicated, where you can find these same circumstances and these same sort of contractual relationships. And one thing I'd like to say is we get to be critical maybe But the Augusta Riverfront folks have done just a marvelous job of operating the conference center
Right.
over the years, and we've got a history with them. But the thing that really bothers me about this, in response to your question, is that there's unlimited rights to assign these agreements to somebody else if they buy those hotels. Now, what they will tell you is that these agreements Augusta would have the option to cancel these agreements if that happens. But the reality is that with all these easements and encumbrances on all that property under those buildings, the reality is all this is a package deal. It's a 50-year package deal because you really can't separate out these agreements from each other. So it's over 50 years, and what really worries me about this, with these very aggressive rights of a contractor, the management company, and the caterer to establish who they're going to assign to this contract, at what cost, without any ability, specifically in this contract, you do not have the ability to counter those costs because once that contract is signed, it's in that contract. So you can say that the budget is just an advisory, has an advisory role, it has no impact or force in law under this deal. So you could have an aggressive Wall Street firm come in here and they could buy up the hotel and these contracts, and there's literally no limit to what they can charge Augusta, Richmond County under these sets of documents. And I say that in all sincerity and seriousness.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.